So guys, thanks for joining. My name is Joel and I'm a practice solution architect. And what I want to do today is basically give you a brief intro into the system, not only from a user's perspective that we have done a couple of times during the last few weeks, but also a little bit more from the management perspective and stuff that can be customized and things like that. Okay, so I'm not gonna go over every feature. We don't want to make this a very overwhelming session, but we do want to cover a lot of small stuff. Having said that, if you have any questions, please make sure to stop me and ask those questions. And again, I'll be happy to answer them. Okay? So first of all, PractiTest is what it's called an ALM solution. ALM stands for Application Lifecycle Management. And that's a fancy name to say that we have modules to manage your end-to-end process, from requirements management, your testing repository, your test execution repository, issue tracking, reporting, dashboarding works. Having said that, the system also integrates very well with third-party tools. And so what I'm going to be showing you today is how PractiTest works in the context of the integration with Jira, because we're currently working with Jira. We also integrate very well with automation tools. So at any point, if you're going to be having automatic test cases that you want to be reporting the results into PractiTest, take into account that that can also be done quite easily. Now, let's do an end-to-end run of the system, how it works, and then I'll show you how the Jira integration works into that part, and then I'll show you a little bit of customizations, okay? So the system will start from requirements, okay? Either those requirements will be brought up from Jira. You can import those requirements from Jira. You can write them directly into PractiTest, so you will have them here. Those requirements will then be linked into test cases. We have two testing modules. The first one is the test library. This is your testing repository. This is where you write and create and manage all of your test cases. Then when you want to run these test cases, you go over to our next module called the test sets and runs, where you take the test cases from the test library and you create test sets or test suites that you then assign to testers, and they're going to go ahead and execute those test cases if you want. And throughout the whole process, you will either be reporting issues directly into Jira or to PractiTest itself. And so we also have a standalone issue tracking module that you can choose to use or not. When you're working with Jira, also those bugs in Jira will be reported into PractiTest automatically. Now, let's take a deeper look into how everything that I mentioned works. And so if I go into one of my requirements, and again, you can import them from Jira, and I will show you how that works. But once you have them into PractiTest, and again, a requirement will have the name that will come from Jira, the description that will come from Jira. Once you have those requirements within PractiTest, then you can link them into test cases, as I said. And you do that from the traceability module. In this case, I can see that my requirement number 6, login and validation, is being tested by 2 of my test cases here. Again, these test cases are test number 1 and number 2 that reside within the test library module. If I wanted to add more test cases into my traceability, I can either type here their numbers and add them, or select them from the list of test cases that I have in my project and just add them into my coverage in here. Now, the important thing is that once you have these test cases linked to your requirement, we will be able to calculate the status of your requirement based on the status of the test cases covering it. So in this case, because one of my test cases is failing here, then PractiTest will set or calculate the status of your requirement as failed in here. Okay, and again, that happens automatically. If you take that into account, then you can see here the status of our requirements in PractiTest and see that we provide you more information about what's going on in the project. So for example, this requirement here and this one here are in status passed. And passed means that every single test case is covering this requirement has been run successfully. So everything is passing. You can see some of them that are in status started. Started means that so far every step and test cases that I have run are actually passing, but I haven't finished yet. So it's kind of a so far so good status. You have not run, which means that for these 3 requirements, I have test cases covering them, but I haven't run them yet. And that is in contrast to not covered for this requirement. That means that these 2 guys are basically orphan requirements or requirements that do not have any test cases covering them. That might be on purpose, or that might be a flaw that you want to correct. In any case, we're going to be giving you that information up front. Okay?
Okay.
Questions so far?
No, all pretty straightforward. So
Now, do take into account there are plenty additional features like the batch edit and the print functionality and the filters. Some of them I will cover later, but some of them I will just leave you so that you play with them. This should be pretty straightforward features. Now, moving forward.
Quick question.
Yes.
Sorry, Joel, can I just so one of the guys the other day picked up that their filter tree, they can't actually pin it. So they were having trouble. Yeah, they were not getting the folder, and they weren't able to pin it to the main view there. Is there anything around that, or?
What do you mean by pin it? I mean, obviously you don't have folders, you only have on test library, tests and runs.
Yeah. So, I mean, so that it's constantly visible.
It should be visible based on how you left it. So if I come here right now, it will be closed. If I go back to my requirements, it should be open. It's actually stored on the browser cookie for each one of the users. So just if that user has an issue, let him contact support. First of all, let him see that his cookies are okay and he's saving cookies and he's enabling them. That might be an issue. And if that's not the issue, then he should contact support and we'll figure it out with him.
No worries, thanks.
Okay. By the way, we'll talk about the filter trees in a couple of minutes in the context of the test library. Okay. So moving forward, we have our requirements. We want to start writing our test cases. So we move over to our test library. These are our practice test cases. As I said before, you write the test cases here, you manage them here, then you run them within the tests and runs. If I go over to one of my test cases, let's take a look more in detail at this point. Then the test case will have a name field here, description here. By the way, description can actually have as much information as you want. We're just very careful with how we manage the, let's say, information in your screen, because sometimes you do have a lot of info and we want to keep it as compact as possible. What you see here below and here on the right are what we call custom and system fields, or fields if you want. And they are here in order to help you catalog or categorize what are your entities about. It might be a requirement, a test, a run, even an issue. This is very similar to what Jira has as well, when you can add information to specify what is this entity about, in this case, our test cases. Within PractiTest, as you will see later on, we will be using these fields in here also to organize our stuff using the filters that Jonathan was actually talking about before. Now, you can add and remove any type of fields you want. You have regular fields, list fields in here. You have what is called a linked list. So if I choose here a specific component, then different lists of subcomponents will come. So if it's application server, I will see system login and definitions. And if I move to client side, then I will have here a different list to choose from. Okay, so all of that is standard, and you can customize. You can play with whatever you want to have in here. Every entity also have attachments, obviously comments, email notifications, history, traceability, everything that we have talked about previously. Now, within the steps, this is going to be the heart of your test cases. Then if I go over to my steps tab, then you will see that this is a step in PractiTest. That's what you can see here. The step will have a name field here. This is the name. This is our description field, as you can see here from the title. These are my expected results. Okay, so you can choose to add all of this information or only part of it. For example, if your testers are experts on the system, then maybe you only want to work with step names. If you want to work with more of evidences and maybe certifications, then you want to add as much as you want, but again, it's up to you. You can also add attachments at the level of your steps, and these attachments will be shown on runtime to your testers. So if, for example, you want to have here images that people can see how the system looks on your iPhone versus your Android device or your website, then you can add them in here and they will see it. The same goes for data if you want, or any other type of file that you want to have in here. Remember, the ones that you add on the steps will be shown when you're running your test cases. You can have as many steps as you want. You can add them at the top, in the middle, at the bottom. We have also a function called call steps from another test. So imagine, for example, we have here, this is an embedded login test case, but let's say that you have a test case that is more complex, more robust, like create a report and verify the results. Maybe that test will start by logging into the system, and maybe half the test cases in your test library will start with logging into the system. So you don't want to write the 2 steps for login every single time. You can write it on a specific test, on an external test if you want, and then just call it here. When I call my test case, I can, again, see all the test cases that I want. In this case, if I want to add here a login test, and I just add it here. And even though here it looks like a link, when I will go ahead and run this test case, then you will see them as all the steps that are within my valid login functionality in here. Okay, so it's basically a shortcut to let you work better. By the way, also, if later on in your project you update the valid login test case, then it will automatically update all the next test cases that you will be running. Meaning every test that you run from now on will have the new steps and not the old ones. Okay. Questions about this so far? Again, obviously you will start working and it'll be faster and easier, but just to talk about all that. Now, there are additional things that I do want to talk about. For example, let's say that you want to modify multiple test cases at once, so you can select them here, either all of them or cherry pick them if you want. And you have the batch edit that will let you, again, modify multiple steps in one go. You have the clone test functionality that will let you either duplicate your test cases internally within your project, or you can also clone between projects. So if you want to copy a test from project A into project B, you can clone them and then copy it to another project if you want. Okay, again, shortcut features that are very, very useful. Now, before we talk about how to execute your test cases, I want to make a short stop and talk a little bit about our filter trees, or how do we like to manage information in PractiTest, okay? Now, one of the things that we're trying to do within PractiTest is to solve all sorts of problems that we have seen in other tools, in other environments as well. One of the biggest problems that we saw early on was how do you manage test cases, or even requirements, or even issues, where the problem was that when we look into a test case, it's not a one-dimensional thing, meaning not one-dimensional, meaning it's not that I can organize it only based on components and subcomponents like many people tell us we should, because on the other hand, in addition to component subcomponent, we might have test levels, okay? Is it a sanity test, a regression test, a new feature test? Maybe we have priorities for test cases that are independent from the other parameters. Maybe my test case is either manual or automatic. And again, this is independent from the other parameters. So trying to set a folder structure that takes into account my levels, components, and, for example, automation status becomes basically impossible. So you end up having all sorts of compromises, like multiple folder structures, or folder structures that are embedded into other folder structures. And it becomes first cumbersome and then problematic, because test cases are getting lost, or you want to plan your next execution cycle and you don't find all your test cases, or you don't run all the test cases. So again, it's basically problematic. So we came up with another solution. It's a solution that has all the values from the folder structures, but additional values from filtering as well. This is called filter trees. Let's say, for example, that I want to start by organizing my test cases based on the component or subcomponents that I have. Again, you can see in this demo, I have application server and plugins. If I want to see only my application server test cases, then I can create a filter here. Now, it looks like a folder. I'm seeing only my application server test cases, but it is actually a filter, meaning it is dynamically defined. If I come here to see how it was defined, then I can see that what I'm seeing here are all the test cases where my component field, this is the filter criteria. I choose here the field that I want to filter based upon. Component. I have here my criteria. Is not, is empty, is not empty. And I have here my all the values for the field that I choose from. So in this case, I choose my application server. So I'm bringing all the test cases where my component field has the value application server. You can make it simple like this one, or you can make it more complex. Maybe I want to see all of my backend test cases. So it's either application server or database server. You can make it like this. Or maybe you want to pinpoint specific test cases and say, not all of the application server or database server, but only those that are currently failing. So I can say, based on run status, is failed. Okay? So create any type of very specific or very non-specific criteria that you want to create. And in addition to defining what test cases you want to see, you can also choose what fields you want to display on the grid outside. So these are the fields that I'm currently displaying. If I want to show, for example, how many steps my test cases have, I can add my step count field in here. And now I will start seeing how many steps my test cases have. Now, so this is a filter structure. It's very simple, but it also functions on multiple levels or multiple hierarchies like you would do in folders. So if I want to see right now only my entity definition test cases within my application server test cases, I can create another filter. and see here only my entity definitions in here. Okay, and obviously it's the same way. You can define additional filters within filters within filters, and so organize your data any way you want. Now, up to now, it looks like folders, but if you want to, then something that you can do with filters that you cannot do with folders is, for example, if you notice here, I have test cases that are either sanity or regression. If I want to see right now all of my regression test cases, then I can just disregard this filter tree here, create another one, and see all of my regression test cases, regardless of the components or subcomponents that I have. Okay, then if within that I want to filter based on components, go ahead and do it. You can do the same for any criteria you have. Test cases that have been run in the last 6 months versus those that haven't been run. Test cases that are passing versus those that are failing, based on priorities, based on products, based on anything that you want, any criteria. You can create as many filter trees and basically slice and dice your information, not only any way you want, but using multiple ways at the same time. Okay, so it's a very nice concept, but it's important to understand from the very beginning. Questions about this?
Joel, just with the actual filters, could they be copied from project to project?
We have actually a feature request where people are asking, first of all, to copy filters within the same project, meaning maybe you have a version 1 and then a structure within that, and you want to make it for version 2. And then we're also seeing if maybe we can copy them when we create a project in the same way that you can copy the fields, maybe also copy a filter structure. But we're still looking into that.
Okay, no worries, thanks.
Okay, let me just write it down here that you also requested that, because obviously we weight features based on request. Okay. So let's move forward. We have our test cases in here. We want to start running them. So let's go over to the test sets and runs. What you see here are 4 test sets. You can have as many as you want within the project. Obviously, they're going to be managed using filters here based on versions or statuses or type of test sets that you're actually running. If I look into a test set here, this is a collection of test cases, by the way. You can see that the overall status of my test set is failed. But if I hover on top of the run status bar, I can see inside my test set and see that 2 of my test cases are passing, 1 is blocked, and only 1 of them is failing. I can go inside my test set, and I can see information about the test set, for example, the fields that are defining my test set. Again, a high-level overview of the test within the test set. And here below, I can see the actual test cases that comprise my test set. See, once again, the 2 of them are passing, 1 is failed, and 1 is blocked. If I want to see my failed test, I can click here. I can see that it was run earlier today by a guy in my team called Pete, failed, and I have a bug that was reported from it. So this is a link to the bug that was reported from my test case. I can go inside my test and see that the first step passed. This is why it's in green here. Second step is the one that is failing. I can see here the actual results, what my tester reported while failing this test case, as well as the bug that was linked directly to this step from within this test run, if you want. Now, let me show you how you can actually add a new test and run it if you want. So if we go over to our test set in here, and if I want to add more test cases into my test set, I just press this link in here, add test to test set. I have here my filters again, so I can use any filter to navigate wherever I want within the application. Now I can either add my whole view if I want, or cherry pick the test cases that I want to add into my set. These 2 in here, and add them into my test set. To run my test, I press here on the run button, and I'm going to be taken into my testing here. This is the view that your testers are going to be getting when they run their test cases. Once again, you have here the name of the step that you have in your, the name of your step. This is the description of your step, expected results. All of these we actually defined on the test library. And what I have in here are my actual results. Whatever I'm going to be defining that deviated from what I was actually expecting to get. You have here your action buttons. So if I want to set my test to pass, for example, my step to pass, I set it here to pass. Let's say that my second step also passed here. But let's say that as I was running my third step, creating a user, something happened in the system and I run into a bug. So I should start by adding my actual results in here. So I press here. And let's say that what happened was that I got an error message, 500, when adding a new user. these are my actual results. This is what happened. Now, I can either fail my step in here, or I can do something better. I can fail my step and report an issue. I have here these links in here that will allow me to do all of that. So let's say that I want to fail an issue. Remember, I have my Jira integration set up. So if I press here and fail an issue, what I want to do, I want to report a bug directly into Jira. So what PractiTest will do, based on the configuration of your project, we will go ahead and link you or open a new bug within Jira. So you can see this is the new bug screen within Jira. It will be the same screen that you're currently using in your Jira project. You will see here that on the summary, we already added the name of the test that was where the bug was reported. You can obviously modify it if you want. You can also see that the description of the bug in Jira will also capture the information that you had up to now. So you will have the step number 1, step number 2, step number 3, and even the actual results that I just reported in here. We'll obviously report only until the step that you're running at this point, because all the forward step, all the additional steps are not relevant for these test cases that you report in the bug upon. All the rest of the form will be based on whatever customizations you have in Jira. In my case, I only need to add myself as a reporter, and then I can just create the bug in Jira directly. Once we report the bug in Jira, you will see that on your Jira issue, you will have this area here where you will have all the places where this bug in Jira is linked to a test case in PractiTest. What you have in here are links. This is a link to your test run on the tested and runs. This is a link to your test library if you want to see the original test cases entirely from test library if you want. And obviously, you can use them in order to reach your test cases. You also have here the updated result of your test running here if you want. And also within PractiTest, if I refresh my screen, you will see that I have here a link to your bug in Jira. Now, also to make a stop in here, what is happening behind the scenes is that within PractiTest, we actually reported the bug in Jira, but we also added a copy of that bug within our issues module in PractiTest. That is what you can see here. Notice that this bug in PractiTest will have the information of your bug in Jira. So the name of the bug comes directly from Jira. You cannot modify it in PractiTest. The same goes for the description of the bug, comes directly from Jira, as well as the status of the bug. Everything is just copied in practice so that, again, if you don't want to go into Jira all the time, you can still see this information in Jira. What is very important is that if I am to modify this information in Jira, it will also be modified in PractiTest directly. So if I go to Jira, for example, and modify the name of my test, let's say error message when adding user, and I start progress on my bug so that it's not on to do, but it's in progress. And again, I'm doing this in Jira. If I go right now into PractiTest and I just refresh my screen, you will see that everything was updated. The name of the bug as well as the status of the bug. If I was to modify the description, it will also be modified in here. And that is because we have a plugin in Jira that it's making sure that whenever something is modified in Jira, it will get back into PractiTest and update us with that information all the time. Okay? Questions about this so far?
Yeah, I've got a quick question for you, John. So just in relation to the testing process side of things, so a tester's raised a bug, they've got to do a retest, or the bug's been fixed, they go back into PractiTest, they rerun the test case, it passes this time round. The status update in Jira, is that immediate, or is there a process that we need to go through? So say, for instance, you went back in and now passed the test case that you originally failed.
It really depends on how you do it. For people who are very, they want to have this failed in here turn into a pass in order, as part of their, let's say, revision process, then let's say that the bug in here was set to fix, then I would come in here. It will take me directly into the bug where the steps that I was running. This is the step that failed that is linked to this test. So I can then go ahead and set it to pass in here. Now, when you set it to pass in here, it should already be updated in Jira. Let me just refresh my Jira here. Oh, sorry, right now it's not completed because the test is not completed. Sorry, it's the status of the test. I need still to run, let's say if I run my other steps, the step is actually passed, then now it will be set to pass. So that will be immediate. So that would be that part of the process that you want to do. You go ahead and you update the status of your step to that in there. Okay. Now, a good practice would be still to leave your bug in here so that you can trace it back and say, okay, right now it's passing, but originally I had a bug in here so I can see that it was failing at one time in my history.
Yep.
Okay?
Okay.
Guys, in addition to what you saw here, you also have some additional stuff that you can do within your steps. First of all, you have here the actions. Actions will allow you to either modify a step on the run, add steps above, below, or even delete steps. And the idea is that sometimes you're running a test case and you realize that it's not up to date. So instead of going to the test library and then modifying everything, you can do it directly from your run. Now, when you modify a step, it doesn't necessarily need to affect the original test and test library. So by default, we do it by default, when you start, we do it only on your execution. If you then want to say, no, I want to make this test, this change permanent so that every time this test will be run in the future, it will be updated, then you just press this button in here, update original test, and you can go ahead and update the test and test library with the changes you did in here. Okay, that is also a nice feature in there. Okay. Now, an additional feature that we added not too long ago, it's a feature called permutations. It's useful when you have to run the same test set on multiple environments, for example, or multiple languages, or multiple times. Let's say that I'm supporting multiple operating systems and browsers, and I want to run the same sanity test case. It's a pretty cool feature. Let me show you how it works. Let's say that I want to create a new test set, and I come here, and let's say that I will call it sanity on browser. Okay, this is my test set in here. Let's say that I want to add my test case in here. So I will go to my sanity test cases in here, and I will add all the test cases in my view. So right now I have one test set that is called sanity on browser, and it has 4 test cases on it. Once I have this, let's just save it and close it here. Let's say that I want to take this test set in here and create copies of this test set for all the combinations of browsers and operating systems that I need to run. So I just press on this button, on this, I selected here, I can select either one or multiple test sets. And I have here this link called Create Permutations. If I press it in here, sorry. If I press it in here, what I will get are all the fields within my test set. Okay, I can have all the assigned to fields, versions, in this case, all the browsers that I have and operating systems that I have in my test set. Again, these are fields that I added already into my test set. And what I want to create are permutations or combinations of all the browsers and all the operating systems in here. Okay, so I select these 2 fields, so you can select as many fields as you want for that. The next step, the system will display to me all the possible permutations that I can create. So you can see here that I have all of these permutations in here. Maybe I want to create for all of them, so I can select them all, and they will be created here. What you see on the right-hand side is what will be created. Maybe you want to only cherry pick some. Okay, so sorry, select all. Maybe I don't want to do all of them, but I want to do only this one here, let's say this one and this one here, and these 2 in here. Okay, so these are the permutations that I'm going to be creating out of the whole list. I always get here how many test sets, how many instances I'm going to be creating. And when I press finish, the system will go ahead and create those combinations for me. Now, this happens behind the scenes, so I'm going to make it only a quick refresh. And you can see here all the new test sets were created. Sanity on browser for Windows, Firefox 3, Windows IE 8, Mac Chrome, Linux Opera. And if I go into that, and you can see, sorry, small issue in here. You can see here that everything was actually set up in here as needed. Okay, oh, not for me here. Small bug in there, but sorry about that. But the idea is that you can very quickly create combinations of test cases that will actually show you, will allow you to, again, then assign them to different people and make all that work a lot faster than what you could do. Okay?
So the test steps gets updated as well when you do that?
The what, sorry?
Test steps inside.
Well, they're here. They're always here. Yeah. If you come here, then you have the same test steps that you have in all your test cases. Remember, all the test sets, all the test cases in here are actually referring to the test cases that you had on the test libraries. Okay, so imagine that you're creating your templates on the library. Whenever you create a test set, you're basically duplicating those templates into a test set that you have. Okay, just as a heads up, in about a week, we're going to be releasing an exploratory testing kind of test case. So we will obviously notify everyone. But once you have it, what you will see in practice is that instead of only adding test cases from the test set, you will be able to create a new exploratory test in here. For those of you familiar with exploratory test cases, then you will then be able to create charters for those test cases. And when your testers run them, then they will be adding annotations directly into the test set. So this is a new feature that is actually coming, and a lot of our users are pretty excited about that part because it was not available up to now. Okay, just again as a heads up, but you will get a full notification in about a week's time.
Okay.
Okay. Now, I'm not going to go into issues again. Remember, the whole idea is that the bugs that you're going to be reporting into Jira are going to be also be copied in here. So do take that into account. Something that is very important and people tend to miss is this search functionality in here. It allows you to find very quickly information within your project. So if I'm looking to find a test case that has the word login into it. So I start here by typing the word login. And at first, the system will bring me everything in the project that has the word login into it. Test cases, requirements, issues, anything that it has login in there. In this case, I only have 19 results, but you can have thousands of results for that. Now, if you want to start fine-tuning your search, then you have here these facets, as they're called. For example, I want to see only test cases. So I can filter based on test cases. I'm going to be seeing only 9 test cases. Now, I may still have hundreds of test cases, so I may only want to see those that are assigned to me. And if continue pinpointing the information, maybe only one that it's, let's say, test level regression. Again, continue pinpointing until you actually find the test case or requirement or any other type of entity that you're looking for. It's a pretty cool feature, and you can reach it from the search in here. Moving forwards with the training, then I do want to talk a little bit about dashboards and reports, and then go over to settings. Questions about anything that I've talked about up to now?
I will have a question in relation to the Excel spreadsheet upload.
I will actually show you how to import, but I have it already ready to do when we get over to the settings.
Cool.
Now, there are 2 main areas for information or for reporting within PractiTest. The one that I like the most is actually called the dashboard. You can reach it from here. And this is where you can see all sorts of graphs and information and charts based on the data you have in your project, using the filters that I showed you before, and using all sorts of customizations within the graphs. Now, in this case, I'm only showing one tab in here, but you can add multiple tabs if you want, and each one you can actually define the graphs that you want to see in there. So let's say that I want to create a new tab in here. I'm going to call it AIA, and in it, I want to show a graph for the status of the execution of the test cases that I'm running up to now. So if I want to start by creating a new tab, I can either go to settings and to my dashboard settings in here, or I have here a shortcut called customize dashboard. If I press on the shortcut, again, it will take me over to my settings and to the dashboard settings in here. What I can see here are, first of all, the graphs within my current dashboard tab, but I want to create a new dashboard tab, so I'm going to call it here, create it here, and I'm going to call it AIA. And I'm going to save it. Now, at this point, the tab has been created, but it doesn't have any graph in them. So if I click here, I will see the AIA tab, but again, it's going to be an empty tab in here. If I want to add a new graph into my AIA dashboard tab, then I can add here a dashboard item. I press here. I can give it a name or leave it empty, and it will get a name by default. And then you can choose what entity you want to create this graph for. Let's say that I want to do it for my runs. So I have here issues, tests are the tests from the test library. You have the test sets. Instances are the test cases within the test sets. I want to choose that. And I also have requirements if I want. I'm going to go for instances here. The type of graph, I'm going to do something very quick. So I'm going to go for a pie chart. And now I need to press continue in order to continue defining the information that the graph needs based on the type of graph that I choose. As I mentioned before, filters are very, very important. It will allow you to show specific information. So in this case, I only want to see my version 1 test cases. and I want to see them based on the run status. Okay, I have here all the list fields within my entities. For my test sets, for my test instance, I only have the run status, but I may have others if I want to. And all sorts of advanced options if needed, again, colors or values or percentages, stuff like that. Now, I want to save my dashboard at this point, and if I go back into my dashboard module and back into my AIA test cases, then I can see here the test, the graph that I just created that will show all the test cases for my version 1 filter based on the status that I currently have. Okay, this is a very simple graph, but remember, you can create all sorts of graphs, being them, again, distribution tables or pie charts, as I was showing you, or bar charts if you want. You also have, sorry, I have an error here because of Jira, but you have all sorts of additional graphs that you can actually add in there, progress graphs and stuff like that, as much as you want. And once you have your graphs in here, again, there's additional functionality that will allow you to embed them into wiki pages such as Confluence. So if you're having Confluence pages within AIA, then you can also embed them in there, and they will be updated live all the time. Now, in addition to the dashboard, you also have a whole sort of reports that you can create. And reports are more, let's say, low-level reports. For example, if I want to create a report that will show all the test cases that I have for a specific area in my product, then I can come here and create that report. In a similar way to the way that we created the graphs, I will give it a name. Let's say that this is a test plan report. The entity in this time is going to be my test cases. And I may want to filter, for example, and to show only my entity definition test cases so that I don't create too many of them. And let's say that what I want to do is I want to show all the details of my test cases so that my developers can actually do a review of them. Now you can show all the information, or you can say, hey, you know what, the history, the comments, and the traceability are not relevant. They only want to show the description, the test fields, and the steps. And then you can go ahead and create it. The reports at this point are created as HTML and PDF reports. We're actually implemented docx reports in about 3 to 4 months. But when we show it here, then you can see it as an HTML report that will show, again, the name of the test, description, all the field for your test, and then you have here your steps, okay, for all the filters that I created. And in the same way that I created this simple report, you can create reports for execution, for bugs, for requirements, for anything that you may have. Questions up to now?
For this report, they can save all the historical reports, or they keep updating every day?
No, they're actually going to be stored in here, and they're going to be live. So this report is going to be a snapshot of the time that I took it. If you want, so you can continue taking. By the way, as part of the reports update that I mentioned, that is coming in about 3 months, we're also going to be adding scheduling of reports. So you can actually have the same report being performed automatically once a week, and so you have a history of your project based on every single week, based on the filters that you created. Okay. Now, I want to talk about the settings and the stuff that can be customized in the system because there's quite a lot. So I'm not going to be going in detail over every single part, but I do want you to understand what parts can actually be updated and how. First of all, every user can update, obviously, their personal information, their passwords, stuff like that, but also the email notifications that they're going to be getting. By default, this is how they look. So if a bug that I created was modified, then we'll get an email. Or if a test that was created, that I created was modified, then we'll get an email, stuff like that. If someone assigns to me a test, then I can also see it in here. But if, for example, let's say that you're the manager of a team, and right now you're very close to releasing your product, and you want to get an email whenever any of the test cases in your project fails, then go ahead and just set up this flag, and only you will start getting those notifications whenever that happens. Okay, so these are personal notifications, and everyone can actually set them up for themselves. I think that's a pretty cool thing. Now, if we move forward, the rest of the settings are based on the group that you're defined to, so not all of your users might see all of them. It really depends on if you're an administrator or a specific group that has specific permissions for that. Within my project settings, then you have obviously the name of your project, but you also have a couple of additional features. For example, if you want, we have a feature called time management. It lets you define the time that it should take a test to run. and then we calculate how much it actually took you in practice to run it and help you to calibrate that. Basically, not so much to go over your testers, but just to understand how much it should take you to run specific test cases and specific test sets. So you can enable it here if you want. If we move over to here, then most of your projects will be integrated to Jira. So this is something that will be set up by Jonathan or someone else on the team. It's actually pretty easy to set up. We also have integrations to Slack if you're using it. So you can send notifications to a Slack channel if that is relevant, or create your own webhooks. If you want to integrate PractiTest with other systems, you can do it from here. The filters, again, it's not very useful. Tab just shows you all the filters that you have in the system. One that is very useful is actually the fields tab in here. This is where, as I mentioned before, in order to create your filters or even to catalog your information, you want to add fields into the system. We have system fields here in the top and custom fields in the bottom. Every project will come only with system fields. These are very common fields to test in projects. So we bring them so that we can save you time on them. Still, you can modify them as much as you want. So your priorities are here, but you can come and say, hey, these are not the priorities that I'm using in my project. I'm going to actually define them differently. You can do it. And define where do you want to see them in the entities within your project. So right now are only my issues, but maybe I have also priorities in my test cases. So just define it to see it in here. If you need a field that it's not within your system fields, then it's very simple. You just go over to the custom fields and you create that field. When you create a new custom field, you have multiple formats to choose from, starting from text fields or memo fields that are larger text fields to all sorts of list fields or user fields or checkboxes, whatever you need to work in the system. Again, create that field, assign it whatever you want to do it. And if you need to modify it later on, then you can also come here and modify it as much as you want. The workflow is not very relevant because you're going to be working with Jira, so I'm going to skip over that. The dashboard, we already saw it, is where we can add and remove any graphs that we want to do. I was talking about users and permissions, so you define that within the users and groups. If you want to add new users into the system, just add here their email address, select the user group you want to add them to, and just add them into your project. With regards to permissions, every practice project comes with 3 groups: administrators, developers, and testers. They have their own permissions. You can use them as much as you want. You can create your own groups and then modify the permissions that you give them to your users, okay? So if, for example, you want to have users who can only run your test cases but not modify them, you can give them this permission. And again, to all the customizations, you also have separate permissions for that as well. Also very important, and Jonathan actually wants to talk about this, is how can you import or export information from PractiTest? So I'm going to start from exporting. If you want to export your data, again, just press here and we will create an Excel sheet for your data. The same goes for attachments if you want to export your files. If you want to import stuff, then you can also do it. Let me actually, I will want to share my whole screen so that you can see that more clearly. Just a second. Okay, I should be sharing my whole screen. Now, let's say that I want to import test cases into my project. So I already have an Excel sheet here with an example, and I have here some test cases. Notice that I have here the name of my test, the author, it's a description field, the status, an example of a custom field, in this case, the component field. And here I have my steps. So if this is my test number 1, notice that the first row will have information for my test case and information for my first step. The second row will have information for my second step, but all the rest of the data will be empty here. This is very important. This is how the system recognizes that this second step belongs to this test case in here because I don't have information for my test. So the same goes in here. These are step 2 and 3 that will belong to the same test that has this step number 1 in here. Okay, so this is the only thing that you need to take into account when you're creating the files that will import your data into PractiTest. So let's say that I have here my fields, and I want to import them into PractiTest. So just want to make sure that it fits the whole screen. So let's take this up. And I want to import my data. So I'm going to click here to import test cases. And this is where I have the mapping screen. Mapping means that I'm going to be mapping between the fields in PractiTest to the columns in my Excel. So the name field is column A, so I'm okay. Description field right now is B, where in practice actually column C. So I will come into PractiTest and update this as C. Status is column D. Again, you update that in practice. You don't need to modify the Excel. Obviously, you can do it, but you don't need to. Author is actually column B. I don't have a priority, so I can just leave it empty. Let's say that the test level, I don't have them. Again, only fields that have an asterisk need to have information. All the rest are fields that you can fill or leave empty if you want. My component field is going to be column E. I don't have a subcomponent. And here I have my steps. Step name, description, expected results are going to be F, G, and H. And position, I leave it empty. The first row has my title, so I want to ignore it. Select here, ignore. And now something that I forgot to do, I need to point it at the right field, at the right file, sorry for that. So I'm going to come in here, this one here. And now I can just press here on import. And the system will go ahead and import all the stuff that I have in there. Okay, they imported 9 rows. If I go back into my test library, then you can see the test cases that I added in here. Remember that I updated them up front to be the application server test case in here. So because we're working already with filters, then I will see it here under my application server test cases directly. Okay, so this is one of the nice things of working with filters. When you're importing data, they will already be positioned on the correct filters where you want them to be based on the data that they have. Okay. Jonathan, did this answer the question about importing?
I'll explain what the question is, Joel. So one of the business people really liked the structure of the folder, and one of the questions that came up was, when we're importing, can we actually import into folders, or is it a situation that we will default by default import under the filter tab, and then if you want to move your test cases into a folder, you would do something like a batch edit or something like that?
Option B, you will not import into folders directly. You will import, let's say, into the filter structure or directly to the old test. And if you want then to update that into folders, then you will need to select them here and do the batch edit and then position them within folders. Having said that, I will ask that business person what actually he can do or she can do within the folders that cannot be achieved within filters, because up to now, and we have been at this for quite a number of years now, there's really nothing that cannot be done in filters that can be done in folders.
Yep.
So the answer to your question is yes, import and then batch edit. But I will default and ask, okay, wait a second. If we can create a filter structure that looks exactly like the one you have in folders, why not use filters? You won't even notice if people don't tell you. So that is, again, just a question, but the functionality to import and then batch edit is still in there.
Okay, yep.
Okay. Guys, any additional questions? Anything else that we can do for you at this point?
No, I think everyone's good so far. Joel, thanks.
Okay, so remember, a very important thing, you see these chat box that you see here, it's basically a link to our support. So even if we're not online, if you have any questions, go ahead and ask them. Many times we will be online, but if we're not online, leave us your questions. We will get back to you within a couple, maximum 3 to 4 hours. The idea is that we're here to help you, and you should not try to figure, obviously, if you want to figure stuff out by yourselves, go ahead and do it. You have all sorts of tutorials here. You have even user forums, as much as you want. You have, again, all sorts of stuff in here.
Hi.
Materials, wait.
Welcome to this PractiTest.
Okay, sorry for that.
Where we'll provide you a short overview of the system and outline the main functions.
Sorry for that. In any case, you have a lot of materials that can actually help you, but if you have any questions, just go ahead and ask us, okay? We're always here to help as much as we can. Okay?
Okay.
Excellent, guys. So thank you very much for your time. And if there's anything we can do for you, we're always here to help you out.
Fantastic, Joel. Thank you very much for your help.
Okay, guys, have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
So